Welcome to the Robert Lewis Sermon Podcast. The following is a session from Men's Fraternity. We hope that you're encouraged in your walk with Christ and enjoy this episode.
Oh, it's good to be with you on the second session of The Great Adventure, and I couldn't help but think as I was driving up to this building, it's dark and there's this long stream of lights, and it made me kind of reflect back to the movie, if you saw it, Field of Dreams. Remember that, the closing scene when the camera pans back and there's the baseball field, and as long as you can see as these lights, you know, if you build it, they will come. And one of the things I'm excited about men's fraternity, in a sense, if we have it, men come. And that's real obvious looking around at the great host of men who are here. And for those of you who are first-timers, let me just echo what Bill said. We're very glad to have you here. This year in men's fraternity, these sessions in men's fraternity on the Great Adventure is to give you, our hope is that we're going to give you a new way of thinking about your life, or maybe a fresh way of thinking about your life, so that you can position yourself or reposition or readjust yourself in such a way that you can gain the most out of this life. Isn't that what you want to do? I don't think of too many guys who just want to coast through life and say, well, I'll just take second best. What we want you to be able to do is have the best of life. But to do that, men oftentimes have to engage in a new way. We talked about it last week, that it's so easy for men to just get busy. And in getting busy, begin to ignore the greater questions of life and the bigger picture of life. And what happens is then we get mired in the minutiae of life rather than the great adventure of life. And that's what we're on. We're on a journey together. It's going to be a journey that's not for the faint of heart, I want you to know. There are going to be times where it's not going to depend just on me. It's going to depend on you and your group, and you're thinking outside the group about your own life. It's going to require some courage. It's going to require some focus. It's going to require some transparency in order to succeed. If you stay with it over these next weeks that we are together, because if nothing else, it's just a time for you to come in here and think about you. Give yourself a gift. To think about you and your life from a big picture perspective, from that orbit, because Earth looks so different from up there than it does from down here. But if you do that and stay with it, you'll make, I believe, what I promised last week, some significant personal discoveries about yourself. Life will get a little sharper in its focus. And that is so invigorating to men when they begin to understand even better who they're about and where they're going. Better understanding of how you're wired and your design, and hopefully the things that make you come alive. Every man needs to know that. What is it that really makes me alive? So, having said all that, on this second session, what I want to do is just take a moment. You can use your outlines to follow along. I want to just go back and remember 3 flashbacks from last week, because we're all getting started. We have some new men on board. And just to give, again, some basic statements to help us understand it a little bit better, this great adventure we're on. Here's the first one. We said, life for a man must be more than responsibility. You guys agree with that? It's got to be more than responsibility. And I'm not advocating, by the way, irresponsibility. But life has to be more than a series of do's, or it gets out of balance. And men, I think, as we get older, need a better balance about their life. Too much responsibility can wear a man out. You know, we all know the proverb, don't we? You can even recite it with me if you'd like. All work and no play makes what? Jack a dull boy. It warps his perspective on life, and it robs him of the adventure that he needs to be on in life. Many of you have read books by Patrick Morley, who has a phenomenal men's ministry across the United States, has written a number of best-selling books on men and their journey. And he makes this statement. He said, I've worked with men for more than 20 years. And if I were to make one observation about men today, it would be that everywhere I go, men are tired. Not just physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. They're tired, exhausted by life. Is that you? See, too much responsibility can wear a man out. By the way, in that same movie, Field of Dreams, there's a real poignant moment, if you remember it, right at the end of the movie, where Kevin Costner, who's playing this guy who doesn't understand why he built this baseball field, he has this moment where as he's picking up stuff, he looks over across the field. Everybody's gone except one baseball player. The catcher takes off his mask, and it's his dad. Not his dad as he knew him, but dad as he once was, in the full bloom of youthful manhood. And he stands there with his wife, and he looks at his dad, and he sees the freshness of his skin and the vitality in his face and the light in his eyes. And he says, "Oh my God, it's my dad." And then he makes this statement, "I never knew my dad before life had beaten the dreams out of him." Too much stuff, too many responsibilities can wear a man out. It can also pull a man down. A man under too much responsibility can simply buckle under life. Sometimes you know you've got too much of it when you begin to exhibit certain emotions in your life that you don't fully understand. There are guys, and I've been one of them, who just suddenly erupt in anger, and you go, "Where did that come from?" You're just mad. And you don't know why you're mad, but you're just mad. In fact, sometimes you can get mad and everything around you seems to be going right, but there's this seething anger about something's not right. Some guys express it different. They express it in sadness. They just start to brood about life. Others become fearful. They know something's missing, but they don't have the courage to do anything about it. And all that can pin up. Just feels like it just pulls you down. In fact, when I was thinking about this the other day, a movie came to mind. It was just one little clip. Because I can't usually remember much about movies, but this was just one little clip that I remember about 10 years ago I identified with. When I saw it, I said, "That's me right now." It's a movie called Parenthood, where Steve Martin is just all under the pressure of work and family. That's all life has become. And then all of a sudden his wife tells him, "I'm pregnant again." I want you to watch just for a moment and watch and see if you can identify with this. Let's watch.
I'm really happy about the way things are turning out, aren't you?
You know, with the frame of mind you're in, not only am I not sure we should have another baby, I'm not sure we should keep the 3 we've got.
Well, I'm ready to discuss it. However, I can't right now because I got to go to Little League. 10 little boys are waiting for me to guide them into last place.
You really have to go?
My whole life is have to. Come on, Kevin, get your glove.
Did you hear that last line? Did you see the look on the wife's face? Have you seen, for you guys who are married, have you seen your wife look like that? Man, I have. I've seen myself kind of storming around the house, kicking the dog, slamming drawers. I'm not even sure why I'm doing it. And she's standing there with this kind of blank look on her face. What is it with this guy? And that last line, I remember I almost came out of my chair and threw my popcorn in the air when Martin turns around and says, "My whole life is have to." That's how guys get to feel after a while. Pulls them down. It can also set a man up for a serious fall. Do you know that? Into what I call the X Games. You get under too much pressure for too long with too many responsibilities, and a guy begins to play the X Games privately. Maybe it's addictive behaviors. Maybe it's pornography. Maybe it's alcohol. Maybe it's escaping into childish behaviors, wanting to go back and have a cheap thrill. I'm going to get that cherry red convertible for myself. And I'm going to go somewhere. I don't know where. I'm just going to go. These fantasies of driving along the highway, hair blowing in the breeze, carefree again, unloaded, free. Back to boyhood. Or then there's that affair that so many guys fall into, not for the joy of sex. That's not why they're going back. That's not why they're throwing themselves into that thrill and losing their life and their reputation and their family in the process. It's because life has become at times so burdensome that they just want an adventure. They've just chosen the wrong one. I want you to know life is more than responsibility. Second, we learned that life for a man needs to be woven with adventure. I used this term last week. It means avoiding half-life manhood. Remember that? I think personally, I think a big trick has been played on us. I think most of life is to trick men into a half-life manhood, where you put your head down and you work hard and you believe if you get all that done and get everything under control, life will be good, and all life ends up is responsible. And then it just doesn't feel right. I remember years ago, I spent part of the summer in Poland. We went out to the Nazi concentration camp, Auschwitz. And I remember walking into Auschwitz one evening, and as you walk in, there's a big iron gate there with an iron kind of crest over the top of the gate, and it says, "Work makes you free." For all those Jewish hostages who walked through that gate, looked up, thought, work makes us free. We need to work. But what they discovered, it was a lie. Huge lie. I want you to know, it's a lie today. It's the same lie, just a different context. Work does not make you free. On the other side, if we went to the very other side of that kind of concept, at the other end of the spectrum, staying a boy doesn't make you free either. Being irresponsible, living life below the belt, being self-absorbed in just your own wants and perspectives, that wears out too. I told you when I grew up I loved the Beatles. And I remember that evening on Ed Sullivan where the Beatles made their return. And Paul McCartney stepped out, and for the first time they had an orchestra behind the Beatles. It was a whole new genre of music that was about to be played. And again, just looking back on it in their perspective, because those were young guys who were carefree, the world was at their feet, and they lived irresponsibly if you've read anything about them. But as they lived that way, life didn't get better. It got harder, and it was reflected in their music. So here is McCartney in front of this national audience that's just waiting to see the Beatles again. And he steps out in front of that orchestra and he sings this song, "Yesterday. All my troubles seem so far away. Now I know that they are here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday. Suddenly, I'm not half the man I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over me. Oh, I believe in yesterday." You feel that? It means avoiding the half-life manhood. What it means finding a life, a new life. And I want you guys, this is what we yearn for you this year, that you'll find a life that's balanced. And it's balanced with some of these components. Now, I'm not saying we have them yet. This is part of the journey we're on. But it's a life balanced by a sense of purpose. Okay? A sense of purpose that's bigger than you. Listen to me, guys. Look at me for just a second. You'll never be on the adventure until you find something that's more important than you. It's got a sense of calling to it. It's got a sense of fit. And when I say fit, it's where you're doing things and you just feel like all of a sudden, you've had these moments where you're doing something and you feel like you're in sync with life. All of life just kind of comes together for a moment and all the gears are meshing in the right way. It's fun. It's energetic for you. You come alive with it. And I would even ask you, can you think about right now the things when you do them, they make you feel alive? You know, there are two kinds of activities for all people. There are the kinds that drain them of energy, and it's the kind that they're doing them, but they gain energy from them. Just that little paradigm helped me because I can tell you, I know things that when I'm doing them, I can just feel the energy going out of my life. And when it's over, I just want to retreat from them so I can regather my energy. On the other hand, there are things I could do all day. And by the end of the day, I actually feel stronger. What is it that makes you come alive, and what is it that takes your life away? That would be a question we could stop right here and probe the rest of the day. What is it in there for you in that regard? And then lastly, just a life balance with destiny. There's a sense that it's really going somewhere. It's going to leave something of importance. Life for a man needs to be woven with this kind of adventure. And then thirdly, this adventure we're exploring is just new territory for most men. It is for me. Let me tell you, I'm on the adventure with you. We are in an age right now, we're in a real unique age as men. We're in an age where what else is a growing question for men? What else is there? A lot of us experienced at a young age what our dads experienced maybe at the end of their life. Now, what else is there? That's the growing question for men. And self-management now is a growing need where you have to figure out what's going to give you adventure. Some of you know Peter Drucker, who's a great Renaissance thinker in the business community. Quite frankly, he's a great Renaissance thinker about life. I want you to listen to what he says as he looks at the big picture of life, kind of from, the space shuttle. He says, in a few hundred years, when the history of our time is written from a long-term perspective, I think it very probable that the most important event that historians will remember is not technology, not the internet, not e-commerce, but the unprecedented change in the human condition. For the first time, and I mean that literally, substantial and rapidly growing numbers of people have choices. For the first time, people have to manage themselves, and we're totally unprepared for it. Up until around 1900, even in the most highly developed countries, the overwhelming majority of people simply followed in their father's footsteps if they were lucky. If your father was a farmer, you were a farmer. If he were a craftsman, you were a craftsman. There was no such thing as upward mobility. And now suddenly, a large number of people choose what they want to be. And what's more, they have more than one career. The average working lifespan is now close to 60 years. In 1900, it was 20. In this unprecedented age of options, we need to learn who we are. We don't know. When I ask my students, and his students are some of the most successful corporate presidents across the nation, do you know what you're good at? Almost none of them, he says, knows. Do you know what you need to learn to get full benefit of your strengths? Not one of them has even asked this question. Few people know where they belong, what kind of temperament they have, what kind of person they are. Do I work well with people or am I a loner? What are my values? What am I committed to? Where do I belong? What is my contribution? Because people do not work through these questions, they often sell themselves short. So we find ourselves in an unprecedented place, the most educated people in history with a world full of options for meaningful work and life, and yet unsure of just where we belong. Those who want to live a fulfilling life, who want to feel as if there's some purpose in their being on this planet, will have to learn to manage themselves. They will have to accept the fact that it's their own responsibility to find a meaningful life and to build on the values and strengths that they possess. That's the adventure. That's what we're on. That's the quest that we're starting in these opening weeks. We're in an age of what else? And we have to learn to manage ourselves. And then we also need to just realize we're all pioneers here. There's no one that's not a pioneer here. And to be a pioneer requires three things if you think about it. The courage to take risk and to explore. Not the outer world. It's the place where most men don't want to go. It's the inner world. But that's what we have to explore as pioneers. And pioneers took risk and they had courage. They also persevered. That's a characteristic of a pioneer. We must face what other men choose to ignore. I call it the big hairy arms of life. Okay? And I take that from a moment that happened when I was a junior in high school. When I was a junior in high school, my best friend, Skip Brown, what a great guy. He's now a doctor, a pediatric specialist in Texas. But we were growing up together, and we were just a couple of guys, ne'er-do-well types that just were enjoying life. But we played football together. And I played center and he played right guard. And we played that from junior high, 7th grade, all the way through. And our rivals, our chief rivals, was a school in Monroe called the Neville High Tigers. If you're a Ruston Bearcat, there's only one team you want to beat. That's Neville High. So when we were in junior high, we had a real good junior high football team. We were undefeated. Neville was undefeated. And we played them. And I never will forget when I got down over center and I looked just a little up, there were the 2 largest forearms I've ever seen. And it just had mounds of hair coming out of them. You know, that kind of thing? And all through that game, all I remember were those forearms going through my helmet and finding myself on my back. And the guy who was doing that, I still remember his name, Steve Smith. Well, when the years went on, as we went through, sophomore year and whatever, Steve Smith, his junior year, he was a parade All-American. And I remember our junior year, they came to play us. And they had the number 2 team in the state. And I was so psyched for that game, and they thought they were going to kill us. But we won that game. We upset the Neville Tigers. The next year, we were number 2 in the state. They were number 3 in the state. We go to play at their place. And my best friend, who was always a kidder, they had my picture in the paper, and they had Steve Smith's in the picture, this matchup in the line. And all week, Skip Brown would say to me, hey, we'd be practicing, hey, big hairy arms are coming after you. He'd cut the picture out and put it in my locker, and he'd draw those arms where it looked like Popeyes and said, those arms. He said, I can't think of how mad he's going to be to what you did to him last year. And I tell you, as Friday night got closer, I got tighter and tighter and tighter. So here it is. It's Friday night. We're at Neville High. Big game, packed stands. I'm in the huddle. They just kicked off to us. I'm sitting there, and our quarterback's calling the play, and here's Skip. He's elbowing. He looks over and says, big hairy arms. So I break huddle. I go down. I get over the ball. I look up. Nobody there. There's just space in front of me. And then all of a sudden, over to my right, I hear Skip go, oh my God. And I look over, and those big hairy arms are in front of Skip. It was a great move by the coach. And all night I'd snap the ball and I'd just hear this, ah! And I'd see Skip go up in the air. Every guy has got to face the big hairy arms of life. Let me just tell you what they are. They're real simple. It's what every man, really every person, but every man faces his whole life. He's got to ask 3 questions, and it's 3 questions we want to ignore. But there's some of the keys that unlock the door to the great adventure. Here they are. Very simple. Who am I? Who am I? Secondly, why am I here? Third, where am I going? Those are metaphysical questions. And you go, well, people have been asking that forever. They can't figure it out. No. Don't say that. You can know the answer to those questions. Now, there are 3 basic answers to those questions. The first is guesswork. You can guess your way through life, can't you? You can just guess about who I am, where I'm going, why am I here. Unfortunately, the track record is not good there. I counsel with them all the time. You can guess your way through life. Unfortunately, most men guess wrong. Secondly, you can just take what the culture says. I call it cultural conformity. Whatever's hot at the moment, you can say, that's who I am. That's why I'm here. That's where I'm going. You know, right now, well, I look at our world and I go, really, what is our world saying? What's subtly behind what our world's saying about who I am? I'm just a biological machine. Don't you get the feeling you're that? And they're just figuring out spare parts for me right now. But basically, that's who I am. And I'm here really just to experience more than the other guy. So every day if I hear about somebody doing more than me, I feel bad about myself because I think I should do that. I should be better than that. I should have that what that guy's doing and even go beyond what he's doing. So in my life, I'm just kind of here as a biological moment, hoping to outdo the other guy. And at the end, with this overly optimistic view, when I die, something good probably will happen. That's where we are right now, if you take polling. I call it cultural conformity. Or we can look to what I call age-old wisdom. You can go back through all of history, and they're the same answers that are given again and again to these complex questions. Houston Smith, in his book, Why Religion Matters, makes this statement. It's a great statement. He says, the winnowed, I love that term, the winnowed wisdom of the human race is found distilled in the world's great and enduring religions. That's what religion is. It's taking all of life and winnowing it down to some truths that we can understand about life and who we are and where we're going. It's the best of the best. So I thought for just a moment we'd look at the Scripture, which is the best-selling book of all time, and just simply ask those questions. You don't necessarily have to accept them. Some of you guys are going, they're pulling out the Bible on me. I just want you to know, I'm just going to take a book and we're going to look and see what it says about those questions for just a moment. Those big, hairy questions. First of all, about who I am. When you look in the Scripture and say, who am I? Here's what the Scripture will say. It will say, I am a man created by God. Some of you are going to remember this. Remember this? If you lived in the 60s and you were black, you would remember this. During the Civil Rights Movement, you would see guys being hosed down with this sign on them. Dogs attacking them. Because there was something they knew about themselves that the culture, for whatever reason, would not recognize. And they were saying to the whole world, listen, things will never be right until you recognize this reality about me. And America, of all places, should have been able to recognize that. It was written right in our Declaration of Independence. Do you remember? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and if I can paraphrase, the pursuit of an adventure. And we understand as a country even now, things will never be right till this is true of every man. I am a man, they would say. Well, you know, when you look in the Scripture, it says the same thing. It just adds a little bit more to it. The Scripture shouts out to us from the book of Genesis where it said, and He created man in His own image. And every great enduring faith for all time, including Christianity, has shouted to men what a black man used to shout to a white society, except it added it this way. Things will never be right until you recognize this reality. I am a man created by God. And you know what? That becomes a personal thing for you. Some of you guys maybe have never really gone deep enough into that. That your life is never going to be right until not just you say, I'm a man, but you get the other part in there and reflect on it deeply, where being created by God becomes meaningful to you, a thrill to you, exciting to you. All of a sudden, God is not some concept that's vague or something that I just kind of acknowledge when I maybe go to church occasionally, or maybe not at all. But God is there, and God is somebody I've got to engage and understand and get to know. Because things will never be right until I understand, when I ask the question, who am I? I've got to be able to answer it. I am a man created by God. That's the beginning point. Secondly, to the question, why am I here? You know, in Genesis, it makes this statement. It's a real simple statement, but it's got great truth to it. It says, be fruitful. He looks at the man and the woman. He says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And then he goes on and it says, and enjoy all that I've given to you. That's a real simple statement right there in the first chapter of the Bible. But I think what he does when he makes that statement about be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and enjoy it, I think he tells us as men what our adventure is. I'm a man not only created by God, I'm a man commissioned by God. Now you've got a diagram on there and I want to fill it in for just a moment. And I want to give some illustrations. And I'm going to break down those statements because they're more fleshed out as you go through the rest of the Bible, but let's just stay with that real simple statement in Genesis 1. You might even jot it down if you want to look at it later. Genesis 1, 28 through 30. Those are the verses. But he says, multiply and fill the earth. I think I'm a man commissioned by God to reproduce life. Okay? To reproduce life. We'll explore that just a little bit. To subdue the earth. You know that word subdue in Hebrew means to fight with, to overcome. It's got the idea of making it better. So I would say part of our adventure is to fight for a better life here on earth. And then lastly, he gave man everything to enjoy life. So I'm going to make 3 adventures out of that. We're going to define it this way. When you look at man, he's got 3 adventures. First, the family adventure. Secondly, what I call out of that fight for a better life, the noble cause adventure. And then lastly, to enjoy life, I'll just call it the man-size adventure. The family adventure is not where a guy has a family, marries, and he has children, kind of like we saw Steve Martin, and he thinks his role is just to earn money to give to the wife so she can raise the kids. The family adventure is one in which a guy all of a sudden sees that this unit for him is part of God's calling over his life, and he's got to get involved because he's got an incredible purpose here. And that is to launch out of this home a healthy and virtuous next generation. And he can't do it from distance. He's got to do it by involvement. And it's got to become part of the adventure. It's got to be unlocked in such a way that he's excited about what he's doing there. And he can see the adventure in it rather than see it as dry duty or something he has to kind of pay tithes to with the very last of his energy at the end of a day. Secondly, what I call the noble cause adventure. And that adventure is where a man discovers what I said is something bigger than himself. I was reading this week about the Underground Railroad that used to move slaves to Canada, some 44,000 slaves. And there was a story of a young man there named Thomas who was a slave, and as he was crossing over that national boundary into Canada, the guy who had helped him get there was a guy named Ross. He had never seen him before, but Ross had done everything to get him out of the South and into Canada. And he finally looks at Ross and he says, why? Why have you given your life to do this? And he says, because all my life I've wanted a cause. And you know, every man needs a cause. And every man needs what I call man-sized adventures in his life. And who do we do this with? Well, with the first, we do it, of course, with a wife. With the second, we do it, I think, with like-minded partners. One of the great thrills of my life has been this ministry right here. But it was never put on my job description as the church. It's just something I got involved in because I wanted to be involved with men. And then I got a partner, Bill Smith, a local businessman. And let me tell you, it's an unbelievable thing to be working side by side with him and other men to pull this off. Not because we have to, not because we're being paid for it, because it's a noble cause to see men discover something about themselves that they haven't discovered, whether it's in their family, whether it's in their work life, whether it's in their personal life, and to employ that and to see the life come out of them. Man, that's something you can give your life to. And I have. When we talk about these man-sized adventures where you need friends, especially men friends, to do it with. Remember Lou Holtz? Some of you know Lou Holtz. One of the things Lou Holtz said that I thought was a great thing, he said that midway through his life, I think it was when he was still coaching at Arkansas, he sat down one day and he wrote out 100 things that he wanted to do before he died. They weren't cause-oriented, they weren't family-oriented. They were just things he wanted to do as he really reflected on life that would bring him alive. And he's gone about doing it. I remember watching that and I thought, I need to do that. So I sat down with my wife and I wrote out 25 things. I couldn't come up with 100 at the time. 25 things that I wanted to do. And I love adventure, I love travel, so one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to see the great sights of the world. Now, when I wrote those 25 things down, I was 28 years old, and I didn't have a clue about how I could ever do that. But I wrote them down because I wanted to do them. It makes me come alive when I travel and see things. So here I am now at 52, and I look back over my life, and I want you to know, it was thrilling to stand on top of the pyramids. It was an experience to be on the Great Wall of China. It was fun to stand at the Parthenon. See, I've been those places. Man-sized adventures. And every man needs that to come alive in his life. The key words to reproducing life in a family would be understanding. You need to understand what you're trying to do there. It's hands-on involvement. It's intimacy. One of the reasons I love writing the book Modern Day Night is because dads all over America all of a sudden saw their son and they had understanding with what they could do to bring them up into manhood. It was just a real simple little formula about what to do with your son when he hit puberty and high school and college and then moved out of college into life. And you could do these little ceremonies with him. But guys all over the country took that little formula and began to apply it to their son, and it created a whole adventure for them between father and son that made the dad feel confident and capable, felt like he was reproducing life for the next generation in a noble way. And I'm saying that's just one slice of hundreds of things you can do in your family that's an adventure. But you've got to discover those. But it puts you on this great family adventure and gives you hands-on involvement. As far as a noble cause, you've got to know what my calling is. And that can only come between you and God. What my fit is, what my design, and we'll be working on that all second semester. My contribution, what is my contribution to the world? How will I fight? Every guy loves to fight. When we were little boys, we fought. When we were teenagers, we fought. Let me tell you, any man that's not fighting today is not a man. You've got to be fighting for something. What is it that you need to fight? I think the Scripture says you need to fight to make this world better. In some way, you got to make a contribution that's along your fit and design that gives you life, but you give life away. And then, as far as the bottom one, it's just where we can explore and challenge and have thrills in life. In Dave Eldridge's book, Wild at Heart, he talks about talking to a 60-year-old judge. And they're talking about the guy that accomplished all kinds of things. He was distinguished. And yet he started telling Dave about he and a friend building a boat together, sailing to Bermuda, getting caught in a storm with 30-foot swells. And then he leans over and he says to Dave, "It was the best time of my life." When I look back on the landscape of my life on this bottom one, I see moments like that. I was in seminary, taking 18 hours a quarter, trying to finish in 3 years when it should have been 4. But I made a great move in that. There was a little high school football team that needed a coach. There was an ad in the paper, and I took it. AA. They hadn't won a game in 3 years. They had a rival there who had beaten them the last year 88-0. So my great escape, my great thrill, my great enjoyment in life was getting with another guy and rebuilding this team from the ground up. And by the time I graduated from seminary there with those high school guys, I remember the last year we played that arch rival team and we beat them. In fact, we had the #1 defense in the state of Oregon when we finished. And I look back on that, and the interaction with those young guys, the times I got to mentor them, I discovered all kinds of things about myself in that year. But I had fun. It was a thrill. And I look back and I go, before I finish this life, I'm going to do that again. It was that much fun. The outcome is a legacy when it's a family adventure, and it's a joy. In the book of 3 John, John says, I have no greater joy than this, than to see my children walking in the truth. There's no greater joy for a man, let me tell you, than to have children who are noble. Hear me, noble. Making a contribution, you go, that's my boy. That's my daughter. That's my legacy. I'm making a contribution to this world. Just as God told Adam all the way back in the beginning, fill the earth. Not just fill the earth with people, fill the earth with noble people. Secondly, when I fight for a better life, when I find something about me that really gives me life, when I go out and do it, I make a contribution to the world, but it gives me energy and deep satisfaction about my life. I don't know what that will be for you, but if you miss that, you'll miss life and you'll miss the great adventure. And then lastly, with just to enjoy life, it just leaves a legacy of fun in my life and these great memories. When I get with my buddies, I just want to tell those stories again, right? Now we're just starting, but those are the 3 adventures that we need to explore. And we need to extract from that the adventure for ourselves. Now, again, it's going to take courage to get there, but that's what we need to do. Now, I want to make one statement at the bottom that's really important. Just write it down. It's on there in your outline. It's the key statement. Listen to me. Your job should be a means to these 3 adventures. In American life, we've made it the end of these adventures. It's what snuffs out these 3 adventures. But your job should be a means to these 3 adventures. And then lastly, just the question, where am I going? Well, the Scripture says this, I am a man who will ultimately face God. I've been created by God. I've been commissioned by God. I'm eventually coming back to God, to face Him. Ecclesiastes says, the body of man will return to the earth, but the spirit of man will return to God who gave it. In the New Testament, it gets a little more sobering. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of God and give an account. And we got to talk about that. You can't ignore that, because if you ignore those things, you ignore real manhood. So, for all of us today, let's just remind ourselves that the great adventure begins in my willingness to face personally and practically 3 big, hairy questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? And being courageous enough to not rest until we find some real solid answers. I want to close, guys, with a statement from Edgar Lee Masters. Listen very closely. He says this about himself, and I think we could all identify. I have studied many times the marble which was chiseled for me. A boat with a furled sail at rest in a harbor. In truth, it pictures not my destination, but my life. For love was offered me, and I shrank from it. And sorrow knocked at my door, but I was afraid. Ambition called to me, but I dreaded the chances. Yet all the while I hungered for meaning in my life. And now I know that we must lift the sail and catch the winds of destiny wherever they drive the boat. To put meaning in one's life may end in madness, but life without meaning is the torture of restlessness and vague desire. It is a boat longing for the sea and yet afraid. We're not going to be afraid. We're going on a great adventure together.
Thank you for listening to this week's message. It really helps us when you rate and review this podcast. If you found today's teaching helpful, take time to do that today. This podcast was produced by the team at Sound of a Rose. Visit soundofarose.com for any of your podcasting needs.